So you're a founder and you just developed Widget 2000, and then you hop on a customer discovery call and they ask you a simple question. Hi Brendan, I love the product, but I got to know, how much does it cost? Pricing a product at a startup is much different than pricing a product at a larger organization. And this comes down to one magical word: data. At a large organization, you have a huge team behind you that can really develop pricing for you. You can create supply and demand charts, figure out the equilibrium, figure out how much money to make, read textbooks on optimal pricing strategy based on deal volume. But at a startup, you have none of this. Reading textbooks and trying to optimize a strategy at a startup is pretty much useless. It's like trying to learn how to skate by reading a textbook. Maybe the first hour is useful to learn how to tie up skates, really what the technique is, but months of doing it, completely useless. And that's the same for pricing. Developing an initial strategy is really what the important part is, because at the end of the day, maybe an optimal pricing strategy can increase customers by 10-20%. But 10-20% of zero is still zero. So we really want to get from 0 to 1 to 100 to 10,000. But right now, we need to figure out how to come up with a price of a product that has maybe never existed before, an industry that's brand new, and developing customers that have never even heard of you. How do you do that? There are two different approaches to pricing you can use to come up with a price. First being top-down, second being bottom-up approach. With a top-down approach, you work backwards. You start with how much money you want to make and figure out how you can get there. This is typically more common and best suited for a business that is maybe a side hustle style business where you just want to make X amount to cover some costs, or a service-based business where your time is a limited resource. The reason this methodology is great, especially for early stage startups, is it's simple. It gives you a reason of why you're charging X amount of dollars, and it allows you to know what you expect to make. One downside to this approach, however, is that it doesn't really take into account external factors. If you want to make $10,000 a month by mowing lawns, but you only can work for 10 hours, no one's going to pay you $1,000 to mow a lawn. This might make your price too high for what you're trying to do, or make it a lot more difficult to really hit those numbers. The next approach is the bottom-up approach. This is probably the most common and what you think of when you think of pricing. You take your costs, you add your markup or margin, those two being extremely different, but we'll talk about that at a later date, and then you sell it to your customer. It's great, it's simple, it gives you a rhyme or reason of why you came up with your pricing. And with this approach, there's typically three different ways of approaching this pricing. There is cost-based, such as your plain cost, adding the markup and margin to that. Value-based, creating the final price based on the value you're bringing, and competitor-based. This is looking at your competitors and pricing based on this. If you're a little bit better than your competitors, you charge more. If you're average, you charge average. And if you're a low-cost alternative, you better make sure you're on the lower end of that scale. The best part of this approach is it's easy, it's scalable. The more you sell, the more you make. However, the big challenge I found with this method is the fact that it doesn't really help you get to a price. For competitor-based pricing, if you are actually a brand new product, what competitors can you compare to? You can use other reference points. For example, comparing the horse to the car, which is a great example. But cars are a lot more complex and shouldn't cost as much as a horse. Although horses may have cost the same back in the day. How to navigate through this is to really look at other industries or other things people can spend their money on. For example, entertainment. If you're creating a laser tag company, but there's no laser tag in your area, compare it to something else someone could spend their weekends doing. For example, movie theaters. You want to be within range. If you're going to spend $30 on a movie, laser tag should be within that range, 30 to 50. It shouldn't be $300. For value-based, it sounds simple. How much value does your product bring, and charge based on that. However, the major problem I have found, especially within the startup world, is the fact that you may not know where your true value is. And cost-based, unless you're selling a hard good, can also be challenging due to the fact that on low cost items such as SaaS software, where a lot of it is IP or intellectual property, how much margin do you make? There's between 80 and 85% margin is quite fast and more than you would expect. Although there are challenges with each of these methods and don't really come up with an exact price, these are very useful to set barriers or boundaries to focus on. For example, with competitor-based, if you're brand new in the industry, try to compare to a similar time spent money, for example. If you're in entertainment, what would an hour at a movie theater cost versus your product? If you're a SaaS company, what is that time spent for other software in the industry? The best approach I've tended to see is really the middle approach. This is charging something that is in line with your customer's expectation and really trying to figure out a way to make your price cover your costs, but most importantly, not become a sticking point. Your goal here with pricing early on is to be profitable, but most importantly, not make it the biggest issue why our clients won't go with you. What you have to do is throw spaghetti at the wall and just test. Cold call, develop customers, and ask them. Try to make this sale. But If they say your price is too high, that may not actually be the case. A lot of times, one of the biggest way of getting out of a sale, if you're ever on the phone, is saying, oh, well, that's too expensive. I just can't get budget for that. Then you should ask them a simple question. Give them a discount. If they don't buy it on the spot, 9 times out of 10, it means pricing wasn't an issue. There is sometimes chances where your pricing is too high, or in some cases too low. How you know your price may be too high is from a variety of things. After, let's say, 10 to 20 sales calls, price seems to always be coming up. The big thing here is if they give you reference points. If they say, hey, I'm paying X and it's giving me a similar value, this seems too expensive, this is where now you can have, going back to competitor-based pricing, have some reference points for your pricing. What happens if you have your costs to cover? People are asking for great discounts. The idea here is to scrape away all the auxiliary services you're offering and create a core product. This core product you could charge for much less while still keeping your brand strong by having a higher ticket item. By focusing on this, you can make your product cheaper, get more customers on board, and then develop a lead nurturing or at least a upselling approach to your sales. Getting customers in the door, like I said before, is the number one thing you're trying to do here. So price should never be the limiting factor early on. At the end of the day, the idea behind this video is to really embed the fact that no amount of research, studying, doing complex economics to develop best supply and demand curves are going to ever help you come up with the optimal pricing. The best way is to test, throw spaghetti at the wall, and get selling. The best way to learn about a new industry with a new product with new customers is to develop it yourself. There's a lot of unknown unknowns in startups, and the only way to get through this is by talking to people. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Follow for more startup related content and check out some of the podcasts. Let me know what other topics you'd like me to discuss.